Morning, everybody. This is Jay Marsden with the Marsden Law Group. And if you are watching this video, you are attending another one of our Java with Jay sessions. These are monthly sessions that we put together that address sort of specific issues that come up from time to time here at the office. And we try to address them in a little bit more of a timely fashion. And we try to address them in a little bit more of a not conservative, in a little bit more casual fashion. We try to just kind of talk these things through using real words, not legal words. And we try to do this all in the time span or the time window that it takes to have one cup of coffee. That's how we do it. That's why it's called Java with Jay. We kind of get you the information, get you all coached up, and then we get you on your way so you can enjoy your day. So today's topic is about planning for situations where you don't have any heirs. That's the idea, right? You don't have any, not when I say heirs, not like you're not super fancy and highfalutin. When I say heirs, what I mean is you may not be leaving things to kids. You may not have children to leave things to for a whole host of reasons. You may have a lot of dysfunction in your family dynamic that doesn't make leaving anything to your kids worth, kind of your intentions, in the sense that you just say to yourself, look, I don't want to go through the effort of doing this. There's some dynamics at work here that just make not leaving it to the kids the more reasonable approach. But the idea is that, most people are trying to plan around leaving kids, money and legacies and things like that. But this conversation is about, really, if you don't have any heirs to leave it to, what do you want to do? Kind of how you're going to do it, where are you going to do it? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So when we talk about this, we try to talk about it from there's three things that we kind of want you to focus on. When we have clients that don't have heirs, don't have kids to leave their estate to, one of the things that they're very worried about is, who would make decisions for me if I was unable to make them? Very, very challenging situation. Clients will come in and ask us all the time, Jay, we don't have any kids. We're not leaving any money to kids, but I need somebody to be my healthcare proxy. I need somebody to be my power of attorney. We usually will not step into that role. Most lawyers will not step into that role. Estate planning lawyers, elder law lawyers, they'll be your executor. They'll be willing to be your trustee, but a lot of them do not want the job that goes with managing your healthcare decisions or managing your finances on kind of an ongoing basis. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to figure out who would get the job, who would be making our decisions for us if we couldn't make them for each other. In many cases, that's usually a niece or a nephew, okay? If you don't have a niece or a nephew, if your family's really small or the dynamics don't work out as much, becomes a little bit more challenging, sort of who would get that job. Maybe it's children of a close friend or something like that. You don't have them as formal nieces and nephews, if you will, but you've always seen them in that light, okay? But the idea here is you're going to need somebody to make decisions for you while you're alive, as either your healthcare agent or as your power of attorney, okay, as you're on the financial side. So you're going to need to do a couple things. You're going to need to figure out who those people are. Ideally, you're establishing a really good relationship with them. They know you. They kind of have, an intimate knowledge of what you might want to have happen in some of these healthcare situations and things like that. And they also, you've done the work, right? You've put the power of attorney together. You've put the healthcare proxy together. The documents are crystal clear that if you can't make the decisions, this is who would make them after you guys, for example. It's usually very important to let them know, right? You might want to ask them ahead of time, hey, as we have a pretty small family. We have a little bit of a dynamic at work here, and I'm trying to do some planning, and I need somebody to make decisions for me. I would like it to be you. I feel like, we have a close relationship. Even though you're not my niece or my nephew, I feel like we have that type of connection. Would you be okay if I made you that person? Okay. And then it's incumbent upon you to give them not only the resources from an information perspective, right? You want to make sure that they understand what those kind of life decisions, end of life decisions, healthcare decisions would look like, but you want to make it as easy as possible for them to kind of take the burden off of it to say, hey, look, you know what? I need to kind of figure out, is this a nursing home situation? Is this an assisted living situation? Are we bringing care and help in the house? What's that going to look like? So you want to have that conversation. So you might want to approach this as kind of baby steps. You might want to say, hey, look, I'm just curious, would you be up to would you be up to and willing to do the job, right? And get an affirmative yes, affirmative no. If it's a no, obviously you move on, you hopefully find somebody else. And if the answer is yes, I would suggest that you set some time up, right? And I'm not saying, have some casual 30-second conversation in the kitchen or something like that. I'm saying, set some time up. Go out for lunch, go out for dinner, sit down and have a conversation. Pick up the tab, by the way, because you're asking them to do something for you. So pick up the tab, but say to them, hey, look, I want to sit down. You've been kind enough to agree to take on this responsibility that may never fall to you, first of all, right? But here's kind of how I'm seeing this play out. And you're going to have to be very open about this. You're going to have to be very open about what you want to have happen, right? What you want your decisions to look like. And you're going to have to be very open. I think you should be very open about the resources that would be available to take care of you in this situation. You're going to have to say to them, look, this is how much money I have in my IRA. This is how much money that my real estate is worth. I'm envisioning trying to stay home as long as I can. If that doesn't work out, I'd love to go to an assisted living facility if I can't be home anymore. And then if that doesn't work, I have to go to a nursing home. And I have the resources to pay for that privately, or at some point you may have to file for Medicaid for me, because if I go to a nursing home, I don't have the resources to do that forever. But most of my resources are going to be used to take care of me while I'm alive, right? You need to just kind of lay out the groundwork for this. And then you probably, if you haven't done it, you should consider maybe introducing them to your estate planning attorney. Introduce them to your financial advisors so that they've made the connection and they've had the opportunity to sort of work together and get to know each other, because that's a very different scenario than them swooping in when your health starts to fail and everybody's red flags go up because they think that there's this random individual out there that nobody's ever heard from that all of a sudden is trying to get in and start moving money around and handling affairs and adding themselves as POA. So communication between you and those individuals that you're asking to get this job is important. And then I think it's important that you have communication between those people and then hopefully the other advisors, the other professionals that you have in your life, right? So, your financial advisor, your lawyer, okay? Which brings me to point number two. So number one is you got to pick some agents. They're probably going to have to be younger than, if they're not your kids, it's either going to be nieces and nephews, or hopefully you have a relationship with somebody who has kids that maybe you feel like you have an aunt or uncle like niece and nephew like relationship with them. And you could kind of step in and say, look, we'll help out. And by the way, when people do this, clients ask us all the time, I want to leave them something as part of my estate because I know they might be taking on a job. That's always something that you can do. How you do it, when you do it, that's another conversation. But it's not unusual for somebody to say, look, ultimately I want my estate to go to charity, but I'm giving these people a job. They might have to do some of this, and I want them to sort of be rewarded or recognized for their work. And they get some carve out either out of the estate or out of a retirement account or something like that. So the idea first is you need to have those agents in place. And if you don't have anybody right now that you can even think of, you need to start developing who those people would be. You need to examine your relationships and you need to figure out, these are probably the people that are the closest to me in my life that I could reach out to and ask them to step in if sort of the unthinkable happens, right? So that's the first thing, is figure out who the agents would be. Again, lawyers like to do the after the fact job. They like to be your executor. They like to be your trustee. They don't like to be your powers of attorney or your healthcare proxy. It's just too intimate a job, and we don't really necessarily have that level of understanding sometimes of what our clients want. Now, that brings me to my second point. If you're at the position where you say to yourself, I don't really know if I have those people in my life, and I do want to start developing that relationship, the next relationship you want to start to develop is you want to develop a relationship with an attorney, with a financial advisor. You want to start developing those relationships now for the reason that I mentioned a minute ago, because those people are going to start to have to work with the people that you've chosen to make your decisions. And I'll say it again, it makes it very, very easy for us as attorneys, for us as a financial advisor, to already have an established relationship or an established understanding of who you would want to make decisions for you when you don't have any heirs that you would automatically kind of give these jobs to. It's very, very helpful for us to know that, to have a file on an established client with an established relationship that says, hey, if Jay couldn't do the job, his niece Ashley, because he has no kids and they have nobody in their life, she's the one who he has identified who would be the person making those decisions. She came to a meeting, we met her, he was very comfortable sharing all that information with us. And if she had to step in, if him and his wife couldn't do the job for each other, we know her, we've met her, there's no surprises. She's not this out of the woodwork niece that we have no idea even existed, who all of a sudden says, oh, of course I'm going to help out Uncle Jay. Of course I'm going to help out Auntie Kim, and we don't even know who they are. Because again, that's when the red flags go up. That's when the suspicions kick in. That's when these things really start to become a problem. But if you've established a relationship with the financial advisor who knows the players and who knows the people who would be making decisions, and you have a lawyer or your attorney relationship, and they know that person and they've had conversations and they've had communications, it makes it very, very easy for us to work with them, for them to work with us. And it takes that suspicion factor that everybody is highly sensitized to now, the banks and the financial people. And it makes things very, very easy. And to work with them and to have an understanding of the relationship will serve you well downstream, and it will make their dealings with other people much, much easier. You know, we have long-term client relationships and we're very well versed with what the clients want. But if they change their wishes, or if we haven't talked to them in a while, if we don't know who the players are, and all of a sudden somebody shows up out of the woodwork, and we go back to the paperwork and look at the power of attorney and look at the healthcare proxy, and if this person isn't the person, then the curtain goes up and we say, look, we can't talk to you because you're not the person, right? So you got to figure out who your people are. And then my suggestion would be, again, introduce those people to the people that they'd be dealing with so that everybody has established a comfort level and a real understanding that this is exactly what we want to have happen. This happens all the time. Clients call up and there's a niece or a nephew involved that we've never heard from. We don't know who they are. We've never talked to them. And all of a sudden it feels like they're establishing some influence, or maybe some, they're kind of pressing their case for something, and we get really nervous about this. And we said, look, we're always worried about financial exploitation. We don't even know who this person is. They come from out of the woodwork. So we start to get a little bit skeptical about kind of where this goes. So part two of that would be not only pick who your people are, but then introduce those people to those other relationships, your financial advisors, your lawyers. And this is a great opportunity that if you have not established those relationships, remember, you're going to need more help, because if you don't have heirs that would naturally step into these roles, everybody gets more suspicious. You can alleviate a lot of that by putting everybody in the same room, on the same page, and make sure everybody knows who they're supposed to be dealing with. So number one, pick the people now. Usually they're younger, right? To pick the same level of you from a demographic perspective, because they may be having the same challenges. So you find some younger nieces, nephews, or niece or nephew like people. Number two, establish your relationships now and introduce all the parties to each other to make it very, very easy going forward so that everybody knows who they're supposed to be communicating with. And then number three is do the work. When I say do the work, what I mean is if you're setting up a trust, fund the trust. Great opportunity to introduce those people, right, that we talked about a minute ago. Fund the trust. Change the registrations on the accounts. Put the real estate in the revocable trust. Fund the revocable trust with your liquid assets. Make sure the beneficiary information on all your retirement accounts is accurate. Consolidate everything, right? Consolidate everything so that they don't have to scour the earth to find these accounts and see where we have to go. Make sure you're making it easy for them to manage things while you're alive, and then to be able to clean things up in the unlikely event that something happens to you. You want to really focus on the avoidance of probate here because it just makes it a lot easier for them to kind of handle your affairs. If your house is in a trust and they don't have that familial connection to you, okay? They're not your kids, they're not a niece, they're not a nephew, or even if they are a niece or a nephew, they don't have that connection to the real estate like your kids might have if you had kids. So when it comes time to sell that house, they maybe are going to kind of roll through there, take a couple items of sentimentality, and then it's going to literally be back up the truck. And they're going to clean the house up and they're going to donate everything, and the house is going to get put on the market and it's going to get sold. So you want to make that as easy for them as possible. What you don't want to do is not fund the trust, force them to carry 2, 3, 4, 5 months of costs and maintenance and upkeep, and then they got to come up with a property tax bill and a gas bill and a light bill. So you want to give them as much liquidity as possible, and you want to make it easy for them to start moving this project along to kind of get things going. Many people in these scenarios, many of our clients say, look, Jay, we don't have any kids, we don't have any family to leave this to. We want to leave things to a charity. This is a great opportunity to start thinking about whether or not you open up what's called a donor advised fund. At Fidelity, this would be the charitable gift fund. You can open up a donor advised fund. You can put your charities on it. It's a 501c3. You can start funding this thing now. You can put a lot of money into it if you want to. And then you leave this person as the successor agent on that account, and they can start making payments to those agencies. Very easy, very simple, very straightforward, very smooth. The reason I say that is because what many people are unaware of is the Attorney General of Massachusetts, for example, is the person or the organization or the department, if you will, that oversees charities in the state of Massachusetts. So if you leave money just in your will, if all your bequests go to charities like that, the state, the Attorney General's office, becomes a party of interest to your estate plan. Okay. And so when they become a party of interest estate plan, they have to be put on notice because they're going to oversee this project. It's another level of scrutiny to make sure that people don't run off with money that was intended to be left to charities. But you have to plan for that because it makes the process take a little longer. The charities have to be given an accounting. There's more work that gets involved in that, and it may be easier or better. You might be better off funding a lot of this into a donor advised fund now while you're alive. And then when you pass away, you can leave instructions with the donor advised fund that says, if I'm not around, this is where all the money goes, right? So you got to kind of figure out how you want to do that. Integrating a donor advised fund as part of your plan could work out well, could help take care of a lot of this, okay? So again, just to kind of close it out here and wrap it together, if you're planning for yourself or planning for yourself and a spouse and you don't have any heirs, the 3 things that we would suggest that you do is you got to figure out who those agents would be. Okay. And if you don't know who those agents would be, you don't have a niece, you don't have a nephew, you need to start developing that, right? I'm not saying that you go out and all of a sudden you become friends with a random stranger and say, hey, want to be my healthcare proxy? Hey, want to be my power of attorney? But I mean, these are hopefully people that have some place in your life, right? They're involved somehow, some way. And then you approach them and say, hey, look, I'm trying to put some planning together. And as a result of kind of putting this planning together, we realize that we don't have somebody to step into these roles. Would you be willing to do that, right? And if the answer is yes, then it's incumbent on you to sit down, have a conversation, don't have a 30-second conversation in the parking lot. This is really about sitting down and saying, this is what I would certainly like to have, happen if something ever happens to me. And if you have to make decisions, you can write it down. You can leave them a, break in case of emergency letter that says, look, there's three scenarios here. I'd like to get care in my home as long as I can. And if that doesn't work, and I have to move to an assisted living facility, these are a couple that I've looked at and they look pretty good to me. So figure out which one might be a good fit for me. And if I have to go to a nursing home, here's the resources. Here's what I have to take care of it. Here's kind of where I'm at from a financial perspective. It's either going to be a private pay situation or you might have to apply for Medicaid for me, kind of give them the lay of the land. It's a lot easier to say to the person who's making these decisions, look, I have a sizable retirement account and you can use that money to pay for my care for the next, 10 years. That's what it's there for. I'm not looking to leave it to anybody. So use it to pay for my care. That is a lot easier path than saying to somebody, look, I don't know where my assets are. They're scattered to the four corners. I really don't know how much I have. I don't know how much equity is in my house. I might have a loan on it. You'll have to figure all that out. And hopefully there's enough there to care for me, right? That nobody wants to step into that job or step into that role, right? They want it nice and kind of organized really well, tied up nice and neat. So that's on you to do that. So figure out who they would be, make sure they understand the resources that they're working with. Make sure you give them specific instructions, give them some flexibility. You're not going to figure out everything, but this is kind of how I want the plan to kind of play out. Okay, a couple of scenarios. Number two, those people that you choose, if you haven't established a relationship with the law firm, if you haven't established a relationship with a financial firm, this is a really good time to establish those relationships. And this is really where you might want to say to yourself, you know what? A fidelity relationship, well, I love fidelity. A fidelity relationship isn't going to serve me well in this situation. A smaller advisor, a smaller financial services firm, a local firm is going to be a better resource for me because of the very intimate nature of this care piece here. Fidelity is going to be very difficult to deal with. While they're big and they have local offices and they have a lot of people and a lot of resources, it's a lot harder for them to deal with one-off situations than it is for a smaller, sort of a more boutique firm. So you may choose to change your relationship because you're getting really serious about who would make investment decisions, who would help handle financial decisions for you if you weren't around. And introducing those relationships could be easier. There's a lot of turnover at Fidelity. You might not get that turnover at a local, more boutique shop, right? A lot more consistency of staff there. So they're going to make it a little easier for you. So introduce those people, introduce the people you've chosen, introduce them to the financial people and the lawyers, because that's who they're going to turn to if something happens to you to say, how do I do this? And if everybody already knows each other, it's much, much easier to work with them and it's going to be a lot better. The results for you, for what you want to have happen, are going to be a lot better. And then part three, do the work. Fund the trusts. Make sure you organize your estate. Make sure you consolidate your accounts. Make it nice and easy. Put everything either at one firm or at one location. Have a relationship with the bank. Bring all those people together so that all those assets and everything is in the same place and everybody knows where everything is, and they don't have to go scouring the planet to find out that you got a CD at this bank and a CD at this credit union and a savings account over here and a safety deposit box with nothing but dust bunnies in it over here. Let's make sure that all of it is organized, easy to understand, easy to see where it is, easy to use it for you, for your benefit, and then easy to get it going ultimately to where you want it to go. If something happens to you, it can be easily used and managed to take care of you while you're around, and it can be easily distributed, cleaned up, and wrapped up if something were to happen to you. So that's our Java with Jay today. How do you plan around the idea of, if I don't have any heirs to kind of get involved in this or leave things to, how do I do it? Again, pick the agents, connect with the people, find who your people would be, let those people in your life, let them understand the way things work financially, get them involved, introduce them to your financial people, introduce them to your legal team. You might even introduce them to a care team because they might need to work with somebody to help manage care in your home, care outside your home. So again, the three areas that are going to be the most important, your money, your legal, and your care piece of it, you might want to put them together so everybody knows who each other are. They've established a relationship. That will make things much easier. And then the last part of this is do the work. Go out, fund the trust, clean up the assets, move things around, put everything in the right place, avoid probate as best you can, figure out how you want to handle your charitable distributions if that's what you want to do, and kind of make this job a lot easier for the people that you leave the job to. So I hope that was helpful. We're going to bring it to a close here. I hope you enjoyed your coffee, and we're going to cut you loose. We're going to let you enjoy your day. And if you have any questions about any of the details that we talked about here, don't ever hesitate to give us a ring at 508-858-5324, or you can find us on the web at www.theletterjmarsdenlaw.com. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.